Okay, welcome everyone to our 16th FLCA Annual General Meeting. It was a difficult call as to whether to hold the meeting in person or once again via Zoom, but the Zoom won out. Our quorum in accordance with our bylaws is 10. So Jen, can I ask you to confirm the number of members present and therefore quorum? You're muted, Jen.
Sorry, I so rarely mute myself in meetings. Usually I have to do all the talking. We have at least 28 people in the meeting, so we should be good.
We're good. All right, then we'll go ahead. First of all, I'd like to start by introducing the members of the FLCA board, and they're with us as panelists tonight. We have Jerry Pipe, Vice President, Ross Graham, Treasurer, Wendy Hupp. Jen, can you advance the screen? Jerry Pipe, Vice President, Ross Graham, Treasurer, Wendy Hupp, Secretary, Margaret Brome, Director for Membership, Scott Dales, Director, Community Engagement, and currently the Eurasian Water Milfoil Project Team Leader. And last but not least, Jeanette Parker, Director Communications. So a warm welcome to our special guests this evening. We have Dr. Mark Heilman, Director of Aquatic Technology at CPRO, Aisha Shande, SSEA water scientist, and with her, Sarah Song, summer student at SSEA working with Aisha. I'd also like to welcome all those who may not be members of the FLCA. We hope the information we'll share with you will be of value, and you might even consider joining the FLCA. Once again, FLCA board member Jen Parker is our behind-the-scenes technical manager, and at this point will take us through just a brief Zoom refresher for the evening. Jen?
Hi, everybody. I'm not on mute this time. This webinar format, if you're hopefully many of you are familiar with it, all of the panelists can speak and unmute themselves and chat. For all of the participants that are in the webinar format, we do have a Q&A panel that you can click on the toolbar, and there you will be able to type in questions that you would like answered, and you can put the questions in anytime you want during the webinar, and we'll get to them at the various Q&A portions of the evening. This year we have enabled an upvote feature, so if you have the same question or really want that one answered, you can sort of click on it with an upvote, and that sort of pushes that up farther in our queue, and it says that 10 people would like to know about this question, so that if there is a time crunch and we can't quite get to all the questions, it helps us prioritize the questions and lets you know that other people have answered the questions. So everyone should be able to see all of those things. I believe if you need to ask me a technical question, you can use the chat function to send me a message, and I will do my best to get back to you with that technical question as soon as possible. This webinar is being recorded, so we will be sharing that again afterwards, but yeah, the Q&A part is a useful tool. So, and again, if you have questions, you can always message me on the chat panel. Back to you, Elizabeth.
Great, thanks so much, Jen. So we'll start by quickly reviewing the agenda for this evening, as we have a lot to cover in the 2 hours that we've set aside. The final agenda was distributed to members along with a copy of the minutes of the 2022 AGM, with the election information and a special resolution regarding the proposed articles of amendment on August the 12th. So we have the approval of the 2022 AGM minutes from last year, a report from the president, a membership report, and then we'll move into the Eurasian Water Milfoil update and our special presentation with Dr. Heilman. And then on to another special presentation with Aisha Shande and her student, Sarah Song. And then we will have a discussion with the automated electronics defibrillator devices, can't talk this evening, with Jerry Pipe, finance report from Ross Graham, the special resolution regarding the articles of amendment, and finally, the election of the FLCA Board of Directors for the coming year with Jerry Pipe. Wendy, would you like to move the approval of the 2022 minutes? I think she might be muted.
There
Wendy,
we go.
are you muted?
Yes.
There we go.
There we go. Yes, I would like to move that the minutes of the 2022 annual general meeting be approved.
And we have a second from Pat Kelso. And Jen is going to do the polling. I'll give you just a minute.
So you should see a poll on your screen and you can click yes or no to this one. I'll give you a moment, everyone a moment to vote. All right, so I'm going to end the poll because lots of people have voted. So 83% have voted yes. So
100% of people, yeah.
yeah, so oh,
Okay.
100% did it in the while I was sharing. Okay.
Okay, so we have approval of the minutes. And on to the president's report. So Jen, next slide, please.
Yep, I was just getting lost in my notes here. There we go. Thank you.
Need multiple hands.
I do.
So as you can see from this slide, the FLCA has been really quite busy dealing with a number of things over the past year. From the outside, it may appear that not a whole lot is happening, but we can assure you that there is in the background. As the summer goes on and we all enjoy the lake with family and friends, all looks calm. But we could be compared to one of the many ducks we see sort of scooting across the water. Their paddling looks effortless and calm up top, but underneath its little legs are paddling like crazy. And that's us. We've strived very hard to provide ongoing, informative, helpful communication to our members and using Facebook, the community at large. Since the last AGM in 2022, over 40 alerts have been sent out with urgent messages connecting people with lost and found items, events, new issues of our FLCA newsletter, Ripples, multiple postings to Facebook, news items, and fresh content on our website. We've hosted a webinar through FOCA on succession planning and one through the SSCA on shoreline stewardship. And we partnered on the production of a video on the Eurasian water milfoil with SSCA, and that will be available shortly on YouTube. Water quality monitoring continues through samples taken by Kelly Biaggi through the Lake Partner Program. Unfortunately, the 2022 results are not yet available as yet. We'll post it to you just as soon as they are. Our focus continues to be on environmental stewardship to protect the lake, communication, and building community engagement. Our community has grown significantly over the last 20 years. The number of permanent residents compared to seasonal has changed, with more people retiring and coming up to live at the lake. The older cottages are being replaced with larger, updated structures. The higher lake level has meant the loss of trees and other vegetation around the lake that help absorb groundwater runoff, never mind the loss of the beaches. Shoreline owners are using various means to protect their properties, which have an impact on the lake. Development, climate change, and invasive species are all putting stress on the lake. We continue to be extremely concerned about the impact the spreading of raw septage on the field located up near the 17th concession may be having on the lake. We're in discussions with a group from the area near the other field located near the 15th concession, which has done significant research into the issue. The practice has to stop, but that can only happen when other options for the management of that waste can be implemented, and legislation preventing the spreading of septage on land is enacted at the provincial level. The final report on the aquatic plant study that was conducted last August is available on the FLCA website if you go to the section called Our Lake. Unfortunately, the weather and the presence of blue-green algae last year when the survey was conducted presented a challenge to the surveying for the study. However, the results and the mapping included in the report do provide a basis for comparison going forward as the lake continues to evolve and as we achieve, I'm being positive here, as we achieve success with the removal of the Eurasian water milfoil. Building a relationship with other organizations is essential to building a strong community and providing the resources needed to address the numerous issues challenging the lake. That includes ongoing communication with the Township of Tiny and monitoring council and committee of the whole meetings, partnering with and utilizing the expertise of the Severn Sound Environmental Association, information, networking, and resources available to us through the Federation of Ontario Cottagers Associations, or FOCA, information and membership benefits through the Federation of Tiny Township Shoreline Associations, FOTSA, and participating in the FOTSA President's Roundtable. We've commenced work on ensuring that we're compliant with the newly enacted Ontario Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, ONCA for short, with the first step being the submission of articles of amendment for approval. That will be completed and conditional upon getting members' approval of the special resolution later on in the meeting. And our next step will be a review of the FLCA bylaws in preparation for presenting any changes needed for compliance with the Act to our members at the 2024 AGM. Now, everyone will recall last year's blue-green algae bloom and the subsequent water advisory issued about this time last year. To date, there is apparently no evidence of a bloom or toxins present as a result of the MECP test that was conducted recently, although we know blue-green algae is present, so fingers crossed. We're happy to support the blue-green algae causation study funded through the township and a grant and led by the SSEA. The FLCA is providing volunteer support for the study as well as communication with the community and hosted the SSEA webinar on shoreline stewardship earlier in the summer. More about the project from Aisha and Sarah later in the meeting. We're thrilled that the 2023 annual fishing derby and barbecue was such a great success. There were over 60 fisher kids signed up for the derby, and although not everyone was successful with a catch, and I understand that somebody's grandpa accidentally released her fish, so we had an unhappy fisher kid there. Everyone had fun from all reports and the photos that we got. Over 80 people attended the barbecue in the afternoon, and we sincerely thank the Dales for all their efforts in organizing the derby, hosting the barbecue, and we also want to extend sincere appreciation to our sponsors for their awesome support. It looks like this is going to be an annual event. Although we only had 14 members signed up for the Georgian Bay Legacy Cruise on July 22nd, we all had a wonderful, very educational cruise along with Dave Brunel from Tiny Township Council. There's many ideas floating around for other social activities for next year that will continue to help build that community engagement and promote networking. Ideas are always welcome, so send them on in to inquiries@flca.ca. Coming up in the meeting is an update on the Eurasian Water Milfoil Management Project and a special presentation by Dr. Mark Heilman. I want to take the opportunity before we get there to sincerely thank our Eurasian Water Milfoil project team that you see here. Brian Kelso, Greg Goss, Don Ferguson, Kelly Biaggi, Andrew Partica, and current team leader Scott Dales. And although he is no longer with us on the lake, Tom Hayes, and always behind the scenes, Peter Andrews, for their incredible hard work, perseverance, and dedication to the management and what we hope will be the eradication of this plant from Farlain Lake. But we have wonderful news this evening. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans, DFO for short, has just, literally today, approved the application of the new herbicide Percellacor to the infested areas of Eurasian water milfoil on the lake, and that will tentatively take place the week of September the 4th following Labor Day. This is the culmination of over 6 months of ongoing communication with DFO and the MECP, particularly by Scott Dales, Brian Kelso, and Kelly Biaggi. Huge kudos go to everyone on the team. In addition to this major step forward, in response to our appeal, another piece of good news, we were extremely fortunate to receive yet one more extension, the third one, to our Ontario Trillium Foundation grant period, taking us to the end of 2024. This is unheard of for these grants and will provide us with the resources we need to do the following up evaluation, reports, and possible second application of the herbicide in 2024. But we were all doing a happy dance this morning, believe me. We not only have the Eurasian Water Milfoil team to thank, but all our other citizen scientists that you see here. Margaret Brome, who monitors and sends the information to SSCA from the lake level gauge. Kelly Biaggi, who does the lake water sampling for the Lake Partner Program, and FOTSA, and the team of volunteers doing the water sampling on a weekly basis for the blue-green algae causation study working with the SSCA. Many thanks to all of you. And we know we have many others in the community always willing to help. And we're very happy to have that support. And finally, lastly, but not least, is my sincere thanks to the FLCA Board of Directors. We have a number of members who help out in various ways, but it's this small group of dedicated members who have committed the time, hard work, and their expertise to providing the leadership that we need to continue building the FLCA into a strong, vibrant community association, which has earned credibility and respect outside our own community. I've been so lucky to have been on a great journey since 2008 when I stood up at the AGM to volunteer to join the board with my mother sitting beside me, pulling on my arm and telling me to sit down, sit down. I had a few years off from 2014 to 2017. And although I continued to work on communication and build a new website, and then a little arm twisting by Herb Hopp, president at the time, convinced me to come back in 2017, now that I was so-called retired from my regular job. Many thanks go to all who have come before me. The FLCA has a solid foundation on which to continue growing. And although I've given my time and experience, I've gained so much more in working with so many wonderful people. And I'm now enjoying some very special friendships. And I've learned more than I ever thought I wanted to know about the environment and the lake. Thank you all so much for the honor and the pleasure of serving you and this beautiful lake in our community. And now I'd like to ask Margaret Brome, our membership director, to present her membership report. Margaret?
Thank you, Elizabeth. Hello, everybody. I'd like to start with our membership numbers. First of all, I'll start with 2021. We had 121 members. This past year, 22-23 season, we were up to 132 members. And as of today, we still have memberships coming in. As of this afternoon, we now are up to 107 so far. And we are expecting to process more in the next couple of days. Okay, so what are we doing for you at the lake? Let's look at the benefits of being a member. First of all, we communicate with you via newsletter updates, e-alerts, lost and found, neighborhood help and resources, basically any issues urgent or otherwise happening around the lake. And all the information is reported and discussed at the annual general meeting. We're working to protect our lake and its surroundings by addressing any new issues when they arise. Secondly, we act as a voice of the lake of the community to express and address any environmental concerns, such as the blue-green algae, the septage field, water quality, and any invasive species, such as the Eurasian water milfoil that we are currently dealing with. Social events. The Kids Fishing Derby has been a big hit these last 3 years, and with this year, we added a barbecue with prizes, which was well attended, and a lot of fun was had by all, including the parents. We added a boat cruise out of Penetang with a discount for members, which was a fantastic day on the water. Golf days, and there are more social events to come as we're always looking to change it up. If something's not working, we'll look for something new. It's also a great way to meet your fellow like-minded cottagers. We are your liaison and close contact with FOTSA, the Federation of Tiny Township Shoreline Association, FOCA, the Federation of Cottagers Association, and the Severn Sound Environmental Association. Our main contact at SSCA is Aisha, who will be speaking this evening. You automatically become a member of both FOTSA and FOCA when you become a member of the Farlain Lake Community Association. There are discounts through FOTSA. You get discounts from certain local retail stores in Midland, Elmvale, and Wasaga Beach. The main one being Rona. Others in Midland include Midland Furniture, Trips Paint Shop, AIM Chimney Sweeps, and more in surrounding areas. Go on to the FOTSA website for a full list of retailers. You'd log into tinycottager.org and go into community and then into retailers discount. Discounts through FOCA. FOCA provides an insurance program for cottagers and associations, home and auto, as well as other suppliers such as magazine subscriptions, and we've also done information seminars with them. The website to go on here is foca.on.ca/benefits. You are important, so being a member is important. We have over 300 cottagers around the lake, both seasonal and permanent, and we need to take care of it as this is our communal backyard, our swimming and recreation area. Becoming a member keeps you educated and informed and gives you access to much information, education, perks, and discounts that you may not have known were available. You're given 2 cards, one being your membership card with FLCA, the other is your discount card from FOTSA. If you have paid your membership multiple years in advance, you can contact us the following year and we will send you that current year's card for discounts. Talk to your neighbors, and if you're in for a large purchase or renovation or rebuilding a dock, etc., make sure you use your discount card at Rona. It's 5 to 10%. Keep it in your wallet. Your $50 membership contribution and more could be covered in that purchase alone. You present your card at the service desk with your merchandise first, and they will provide you with a discounted invoice in which you will take to the cashier to pay. How to sign up and pay for your membership. Download your membership form at farlainlake.ca and mail it with a check for $50 to FLCA at 31 Farlain Lake in Tiny. Multiple years can also be added, or you can e-transfer it. You add FLCA to your e-transfer as a payee. Use inquiries at farlainlake.ca. The security question that you will type in is, what invasive weed is in our lake? The answer is EWM, and if that does not work, do EWM, EWM. So do it twice, all with caps and no spaces. Our strength continues to be in our numbers. We are all responsible for membership. Talk it up with your cottage neighbors and friends. I'd also like to thank Louise Hamill for doing a membership collections last week on Andrew Drive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Jen, any questions come in related to membership for Margaret?
We have had no questions yet. We've only had one question, which was asking how many people were attending the meeting, and I shared a text answer of about 40.
Okay.
So
Great. Thank you. So we now move on into the Eurasian Water Milfoil update. Scott, over to you.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining. As the slide says, I think we found the silver bullet for Celicor. Only if we could only use it. Say it's been easy would be way far from the truth. So at the beginning, our plan was for the year. Our plan for the year, where we're at now, silver bullet for Celicor, and looking forward. Can you go to the next slide, please?
it's a fancy slide. Hold on.
Jack, can you slide me up one?
Well,
Oh, okay. Sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So some of the things we've definitely figured out that it's not going away. Where's my slide? Okay, it's growing in size as I can see.
We're having some audio problems,
Yeah.
Scott.
Oh, I think he froze. Scott, if you turn your video off, it'll likely improve.
It's terrible. I know. You see, my Wi-Fi is something's going on with it tonight.
Yeah.
You're back.
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, you might turn your video off for it, because if you cut the video feed, it inverts the signal.
Quickly, it's not going away. It's growing in size. Continued community education is a key.
Oh dear, I'm gonna stop the
Still hear
video.
me, Jeanette?
We're still losing you. I'm gonna stop your video for now. And then hopefully that
Yeah.
will, although you might have to do that. It's not letting me stop it. So if you just turn the video off
Okay, let me
momentarily,
see,
it'll,
stop video.
Yeah,
There.
okay, that should improve it. Sometimes when it's got some issues. Okay. So,
Yeah, sorry everybody for that. Some reason my Wi-Fi is not working tonight. Again, quickly, Eurasian water milfoil, it's not going away. It's growing in size. We're far better off than most lakes. We have continued community education, identifying, reporting, and removal. That seems to be the key where we're going forward. Can you hear me?
yep.
Okay. Okay, so what actions have we done this year? Management plan developed and submitted to DFO, MNRF, and MECP for authorization. We had a lake review for the EOWM hotspots for the 2023 season. We contracted Solitude Lake Management for the use of Priscilla. We applied for a permit with MECP, which is currently under review. Still waiting for DFO approval. Well, that wasn't until today. Yesterday, today. Parks Canada, coincidentally, is also seeking approval from DFO to apply for Sellicor in the Bay of Quincy area this year. Quincy Conservation is pushing for that. We applied for and received approval from OTF for an extension, so that takes us into next year, should there be any further need. And our tentative date, as Elizabeth has said, was to be August 29th, but we got a notification this morning that it'd be moved back to the week of September 5th. As you can see, things are changing daily here right now. So we're doing everything we can to keep you up to date. As fast as we get it, we'll pass it on. So is it our silver bullet? Well, it's been over a decade of research, used effectively in the US since 2018. Is now approved and registered for use in Canada, which is huge. And I think that allowed us to really put some pressure on the other DFO on that, because it had been approved in Canada already. That was our first major step. So don't want to take too much time because we have a special guest waiting behind me here. Mark Hammond, Dr. Mark Hammond, sorry. He's been very instrumental in helping us with right from day one with this. So Mark, if you want to take over now.
Thanks, Scott. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we
Yep.
can.
We can.
Very good. I apologize if you hear noise in the background. I'm in the Detroit airport, and I hope it's not distracting. If it is, Jeanette, let me know, and maybe I can take some steps.
Okay, and I just want to do a reminder before you start that if anybody does have questions for you, they can put them in the Q&A section, and we'll get to them at the end of your presentation.
I started with the end in mind, I guess. Is that visible?
Yeah, it's visible. You're good.
The technology is working. Hooray.
Excellent.
Get the screen out of the way. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks to the association for the opportunity to visit on Priscilla. And thanks in particular for collaboration over multiple years now. We attempted to secure an ability to do a research treatment in 2022. Actually, we've been just also waiting in parallel for a registration decision from Health Canada. And those things have finally aligned, I guess, as far as managing the Eurasian water milfoil in the lake, with the approval registration of the product as mentioned in May of this year. So my goal this evening is to give you a fast overview of Priscillacor. I'll say it, is it a silver bullet? Well, I guess it's about as close as I've seen in my career as far as selective management of Eurasian water milfoil. And hopefully there'll be an opportunity to see that live and in action, and the community will be able to assess that for themselves looking ahead. I am our Director of Aquatic Technology for CPRO. I'm based in Indiana here in the U.S. and I've been with the company for 20 years and been involved, over 20 years, and been involved with the research and the regulatory and adoption of Priscillacor in the U.S. Beginning in 2010 up until today. So if there are questions about Priscillacor that I can answer, I'm not sure anyone can today. But I'll do my best to give a quick overview and address any questions in the time allowed. So, see if I can get this to advance. That'd be nice. There we go. So what is Priscillacor? That's the trade name for our new aquatic herbicide. The active ingredient is fluoroperoxyben benzyl, which is a growth regulating herbicide that in this case is very specific to certain non-native aquatic plants that are problematic here in North America. Some of those include invasive water milfoils, which is the focus of this discussion, but also plants like hydrilla that are problematic in northern parts of the U.S. now and may ultimately reach Canada. Floating heart species, floating leaved plants, rooted but floating, that's another species. And then water soldier, it was referenced, the Bay of Quinte has a problem with a pretty novel plant, water soldier, and that's the species of interest there. So how does Priscillacor work? Again, a growth regulating herbicide that Eurasian water milfoil in particular is highly sensitive to. It only takes a very short exposure, can be as little as hours, occasionally days, depending on the weed species and the objectives. But it's systemic. It is taken up by the growing upper portions of the plant, the water column, when the water is treated with the herbicide, and is translocated to the entire plant to get full control, including the root system of the invasive plant. It was approved in US EPA back 5 years ago. It received a reduced risk classification from US EPA based on its overall profile and reduced risk to human health and the environment compared to other registered aquatic herbicides in the U.S. It also received an American Chemical Society and US EPA Green Chemistry Award for its different uses. Very low use rates, again, a very favorable environmental profile, and registered finally by Health Canada, a pest management regulatory agency, in May. There's reference to many years of research. This is a partial list of some of the collaborating institutions, mostly U.S., but some abroad, that have been engaged with Priscillacor's development over the years. There's a variety of published papers in the scientific literature on the use of the herbicide, development at multiple scales, starting initially at the beaker scale, as the photo shows, working into large tank environments, small and then larger tank environments, and ultimately field demonstrations prior to registration or fairly concurrent with registration back in 2018 in the U.S. There's also been a variety of different additional ecotoxicological studies that are not required by US EPA or PMRA, but they have also been completed and are published or working towards a publication on species like salmon and freshwater mussels. Just a visual example from one of those early tank trials. 1 month after treatment. On the left, we have the untreated condition. We see Eurasian water milfoil and a hybrid Eurasian water milfoil, which is a hybrid of northern water milfoil and Eurasian water milfoil. And we can see on the right, a treated tank has full control of the parent Eurasian water milfoil as well as the hybrid Eurasian water milfoil. But there's healthy native plants. All the representative native plants in this study were not impacted by the treatment, including a couple different types of pond weeds or Potamogeton species, Elodea or Elodea canadensis, Canadian waterweed, or stargrass, another representative species. And Balsinaria is another one that's in there in that tank. So very, very selective. When we talk about the silver bullet, we talk about being as selective as possible and effective as possible for Eurasian water milfoil control. And this technology is as good as anything we've worked with over CPRO's 30 plus years of history. So what I thought I would do is run through one example. There's now many hundreds, if not thousands, of projects in the U.S. That could be referenced with quantitative assessments, and they confirm efficacy and selectivity of control of Eurasian water milfoil with Percellacor. I'll highlight one, which is up in the Adirondack Park of upstate New York, Minerva Lake. This is a project back a few years ago. It was implemented by your contractor for this project, Solitude Lake Management. A very sensitive regulatory environment for using herbicides in the Adirondack Park. And this project was the first that was approved for use in the Adirondack Park by the Adirondack Park Agency. Eurasian water milfoil was first found in the lake in 2007, and in recent years it was managed through aggressive hand pulling and diver-assisted suction harvesting. And in the recent years before Percellacor was used, there's 400 to 500 hours of diver removal annually, which is quite expensive. Percellacor was used in 2020 with the goal of selectively controlling Eurasian water milfoil at scale, and then hopefully resetting the system to where if Eurasian water milfoil was found again, it would be easier to remove at a very small scale, isolated plants, hand removal or diver removal as part of integrated pest management for the species. So Minerva Lake, 41 acres. Apologies for not switching around to hectares, but 41 acres, a little over half the lake was treated. So this is actually a more aggressive treatment in terms of scale than what is proposed for Farlain Lake, which has spot treatments that only total 2% of the lake surface area. In this case, over 50%. And the lake actually had 66% in the littoral zone, 66% frequency of occurrence of Eurasian water milfoil in a late summer 2019 survey prior to treatment in 2020. The actual treatment dissipated quickly, as we anticipate as well for a Farlain Lake treatment, with concentrations of the active ingredient at the 1 part per billion level of quantification by 24 hours after. So the results of that treatment, which are very representative, again, of countless treatments in the northern U.S. for Eurasian water milfoil in the last 5 years. Eurasian water milfoil, none detected in August 2020, the year of treatment. That survey, you can see the summer survey in the middle with the Eurasian 66% frequency. And that frequency with Eurasian water milfoil goes to 0 at 2 months after the actual application in early August 2020. Excellent abundance of native plants, on average about 4.7 native species per site. The most sensitive non-target plant was water shield. There are a handful of plants. I'm not sure exactly which ones are there in Farlain Lake today. But the sensitivity, if there is sensitivity to those plants, they are much, much less sensitive than Eurasian water milfoil, and it would be very transitory light symptoms on the plants. Again, this data and the project was implemented by Solitude. And then this is 14 months after treatment. We see the prior to treatment data on the left, 2 months after, and then 14 months after the initial application. And we still see in 2021 full control of Eurasian water milfoil and a very healthy, desirable native aquatic plant community. With that as background, I just want to make a few comments on Farlain Lake and its planned treatment. There are still details to work out. I believe my comments are pretty well aligned with the permit application in the plan, but please note that there could be some tweaks, especially as the final permit is being pursued with MECP. This is an interesting scattered population of Eurasian water milfoil around Farlain. Certainly not the level of problem as observed on Minerva Lake in New York, but certainly problematic in terms of its scattered in nature around the lake, which hopefully is prevented from expanding further. The treatment currently, as I understand, is targeted for Wednesday, September 6th, that week. Again, very hot off the presses information, I think, communicated today. Water uses. After treatment, and this is per the Health Canada label, and I will note again that the provincial permit should be identical, but is still pending. There's no label restrictions on swimming, fishing, other potable uses, etc. The only functional water uses that are limited are irrigation related. So using water from the lake in and around treatment areas for irrigating plants. And based on the scale of treatment, that should be a 1-day limit. And I'll also note that the turf grass is highly tolerant of Priscilla-core. So just the grass species in your lawn would not be at all affected by Priscilla-core irrigation with the treated water, even if it was done immediately after treatment. I do want to comment just on what would be observed on the lake relative to Eurasian water milfoil. I already referenced very minor symptoms you might see on a handful of mainly dicot broadleaf plants in the lake, submersed plants. Again, not knowing exact distribution of those, but relative to Eurasian water milfoil, there will be a progression of the injury symptoms over several weeks. I'll show a couple pictures here in a second. You may, during this, because we're at the end of the season, there may be a change in some of the native plant community around the lake as we approach the fall. This, based on everything we've done in past treatments over many years in the U.S., this would be reflective of a natural senescence, late summer senescence of some of those native plants. So again, I'm not sure which ones might be involved, but if you see some of that, it is almost certainly a natural senescence versus anything treatment related. So here's just a few pictures of the responsive Eurasian water milfoil and a few natives that I was able to pull from a pond study that we did a number of years back. So the progression, Priscilla-core is not around in the water very long when used for Eurasian water milfoil treatment. It's absorbed very quickly. It's one of the properties, unique properties of the herbicide. It's a short exposure systemic herbicide. It penetrates very rapidly into target vegetation and doesn't really want to be in the water, dissolved in the water. So it gets into the vegetation quickly, but the actual injury response and the reduction of the biomass that started treatment is more gradual. And that's good overall for water quality as the plants senesce, release a few nutrients, but it's scattered and staggered over several weeks. This might compare to dicot, where dicot injury can set in as little as hours. Injury here is definitely spread out over many days to several weeks, and a much more gradual process. So at 7 days, you see Eurasian water milfoil here. You on the left, you'll see some symptoms. It'll be a little chlorotic and might start shedding some of its leaflets, but there'll still be biomass Eurasian water milfoil biomass around. And to the casual eye, it may wonder, is it doing what it's supposed to be doing? Just needs a little more time. Naiad is a native plant, Illinois pondweed, some of the native pondweeds. They are not affected by treatments. Some of the things you see here are not related to treatment on the pondweed, for example. 14 days after treatment, this is kind of what I really wanted to get to, was Eurasian water milfoil responds over a 7 to maybe 21 day period, depending on water temperature and metabolism of the plant. You'll see a very rapid reduction in control of Eurasian water milfoil. It'll turn black, and is basically decaying tissue at that point. Whereas basically all the other natives supported by data, with a rare exception, the native aquatic plant community will be unaffected and actually may expand a little bit without the competitive pressure with the invasive species. This is just another representative photo of native plants on the corner of a boat from a treatment in Minnesota a few years ago. We see healthy Vallisneria, that's the long ribbon-like green, also called tape grass. The Elodea, again, the waterweed, coontail, ceratophyllum. But that little black blob, this is, I believe, 5 weeks after this treatment. That black blob of tissue is what's left of what used to be dense Eurasian water milfoil. And that's what we'd like to see, and that's what we would expect to see with this treatment a number of weeks after it's applied. So finally, and I hope I'm well aligned with your association leadership and your Eurasian water milfoil team on these objectives, but essentially the goal is to fully eliminate Eurasian water milfoil from the lake. If it can be eradicated, we're going to give it a shot. It is a guaranteed control program. I believe it's been selected for the lake, and so we're going to back this up over 3 years, working with Solitude. And one comment is that the first year is actually the only one that's permitted. So if subsequent treatments are needed, there will be an additional effort to seek permits from DFO and MECP. Future management will be adaptive. It will be aligned with detailed surveys of the aquatic plant community. There needs to be a good, strong hunt for Eurasian water milfoil over these subsequent years, and we'll adjust strategy accordingly. And finally, I'd wrap up, like to thank your association leadership and also the community at large for your sustained interest and partnership on this. We certainly have been in discussions on this relative to potential research use and now an approved registered herbicide use for a number of years. I'd like to, in particular, thank Elizabeth Dale, Kelly, Brian, and also Tom Hayes, as was referenced before. And then a special thanks to Pete Andrews, who I can say is one of the most engaged lake community people I've ever met. You've had a great resource there, great passion for the environment in this lake, and along with the rest of the group, it's been fun to engage. It's been hard at times, but it's been very enjoyable for me to interact with your group about this lake and the effort to control milfoil. And hopefully that opportunity is coming very soon, in just a few weeks. So thanks.
Mark, thank you. Thank you so much for your presentation today. And certainly it's been a real roller coaster ride over the last 2 years, mainly because of the government and authorizations, et cetera. But we've thoroughly enjoyed the collaboration. We've certainly learned a lot, and we are so looking forward to hopefully not having this plant around in our lake anymore. It's been a real learning experience, but you've been wonderful to work with, and we've appreciated all the support that you have given us and helped us along with these government agencies and trying to get through. But I think your presentation today was really helpful in terms of an education, and hopefully the members have learned a little bit today more about Procellacor and why we're so keen on getting it implemented on our lake. Jen, are there any questions for Mark?
Yes, there are. So we did have one that Scott answered in the chat, but I'll just say it out loud for everybody. We're asked if September 4th at what time. It seems like that this is a slightly moving target, so we're going to finalize the date the week of September 5th, probably the 6th, but we will let everybody know when that date is, when it's actually confirmed. The second question is for Mark. You mentioned that only 2% covered for Farlain Lake. Is that sufficient in your opinion? In short, will that cover the area sufficiently with the product to ensure that there is not a return problem?
A very good question. Localized spot treatments like this are not easy. Crystallicore does have some properties which make it amenable to this style of treatment. In terms of fast uptake and a short exposure requirement, it doesn't need to be around the Eurasia water milfoil very long to associate with it and then achieve the good control outcome. We have adjusted the treatment rates to be able to have the best chance of a successful treatment, and actually this treatment has been running around in my head for 2 years. So I've had a lot of time to think about it and kind of consider the different strategies, and I think it's well aligned to try to control all the known Eurasia water milfoil that's in the water body. Now, is there going to be impact and full control of Eurasia water milfoil in locations that are not physically treated? There may be some spread that's been considered. No treatment like this to the water is going to be 100% locked in the exact same square meters in which it's physically applied. While it's very targeted, it's going to spread a little, but is it a spread enough to, if there's some unknown populations in a few areas of the lake, will it be able to control those? That's uncertain. That's where subsequent years of work may be needed. We have in treatments where we've had good confidence that we've treated all the Eurasia water milfoil, we've had multi-years of control, sometimes running now beyond 4 or 5 years, and with a single treatment. And if we're fortunate, and I didn't lose my connection, which I may have.
Oh, you're still with us. It's just your photo that disappeared. Oh, you're back. Oh, we've lost your audio, Mark.
Uh-oh.
Looks like you're connecting. Oh,
I lost connection.
yeah. Oh, you're back. Great.
I'm back, and now I'm just using my computer audio, so there might be even more background noise.
It's been pretty good so far.
Good. I don't know where I was in that answer, but bottom line, can we control all the Eurasian water milfoil in the lake? I have pretty good confidence in the areas where we directly treat with this protocol this year that we will get control. Is there scattered milfoil that's still in other areas of the lake that's not been identified? And will that be controlled? I think that's the biggest question as far as achieving an eradication outcome for the full infestation of the lake and having it stick for the long run. Is all the known Eurasian water milfoil, is that it, or is there more out there than may have been located, which, there's a decent chance there is. But again, in terms of how we design this treatment program for 2023 and maybe beyond, this is probably the best shot that I can think of to give you a selective potential eradication outcome for Eurasian water milfoil on the lake.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next question I've got is, does Crystallicore need to be applied annually to maintain eradication? And I think you probably covered that, but likely not. Oh, you're muted.
I'll try to. All right, good. What's the probability of the additional treatments in year 2 and 3? Well, hopefully low. We're hoping to get a lot of work done and control of Eurasian water milfoil in this first year of treatment. Years 2 and 3, though, we have the contingency to go back in at even the same scales of treatment to get the control that's desired, and ultimately take our best shot at eradicating milfoil from the lake for the long run. So that it's an adaptive plan. I think we'll continue a discussion after we see first season of results, and actually we'll assess in the fall and get your feedback in the fall about how the control looks, and adjust things along the way. But hopefully we do a lot of the work in this first season, and not much is needed in subsequent years.
Excellent. Our next question is from Paul Breslin. Did I see a note saying that the formula approved in Canada is unique? Is it different than used in the US?
You're still muted. Yeah.
Trying to keep the background to a
Yeah.
minimum. So
It's not so
for
bad.
Celicor, this is a unique label for Canada. It's a unique product concept for Canada. So so it is distinct from U.S. uses, and but we have confidence in this formulation to perform extremely well. It's a concentrated formulation. A little bit goes a long way. Just to give you an idea, this treatment is intended to use, I think, less than 4 liters of total herbicide. So it's very active, very active on your Asian water milfoil, and again, a very minimal quantity of herbicides being introduced to the lake. So hopefully that's addressing that question.
Okay, and the last one is a follow-up to the first one about the 2% coverage. Oh, no, there's another one, but that just popped in. But it's basically the coverage, I guess, is especially important since we only have approval for 1 year. So if there are no adverse issues, is the 2% too small an area?
Again, we're targeting the milfoil that is known at this point. I know that DFO and MECP would be uncomfortable permitting direct application to areas of the lake where there may be no milfoil. So we've got to find the balance. Now, I can say that on these spot treatments, we are putting a strong rate of the herbicide relative to Eurasian water milfoil to have the best spot treatment impact we possibly can. So I think that's the balance. We're not treating a large fraction of the lake, but the fraction that we are treating, we're relative to what's needed for Eurasian water milfoil control. We're putting a strong rate out there.
Okay, and our last question that I know of for this is how is Celicor applied? Is it sprayed on or just dumped in the water over the selected areas? Will it spread itself out to other areas of the lake?
That's great.
Now, I will caveat this in that I'm not exactly sure the boat and the techniques that Solitude intends to use on first week of September, but I believe they will bring either an airboat or a skiff, small shallow draw boat that is injecting the herbicide into the water, not a surface spray. They're looking to get it down into the water. For some of these locations that are deeper, they do have weighted trailing hoses that they will seek to have positioned by boat speed and length of those hoses to be at the proper depth to try to localize the injection of the herbicide more effectively right around the plants. So, the exact techniques a little bit dependent on some of the strategies that Solitude seeks to ultimately implement in a few weeks. But if there's more questions on that, that could be directed to Glenn Sullivan with Solitude.
Okay, great.
And Jen, just maybe to add, and going back to the other question about the permitting just for 1 year, it doesn't mean that we can't apply for a permit again next year if we need it. So it's not limited to just 1 year. It's just that we are going to have to apply again for next year if we want to apply it again next year. We just have to go through the approval process again.
Okay, great. All right, it doesn't seem that there's any more questions on this topic for now, so we can probably move on to the next topic.
Mark, thank you so much, and safe travel with the rest of wherever you're going there from that airport. Thank you for making the time.
Thank you. The airport did get a lot busier here in the last hour. I can say that. But thankfully the technology mostly worked, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with everyone, and maybe I can make it up for the treatment. I'm still
That would be
looking
great.
at it.
Great. We look
see.
forward to seeing you again. That would be super. Thanks, Mark. Safe travel.
Thank you.
Okay, Aisha, is Aisha with us?
She is.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Hey, Aisha, we can.
Perfect.
Everybody, just before you share your screen there, Aisha, I'd just like to introduce Aisha to do a special presentation. And she's joined by Sarah Song, her student. Aisha has a master's degree in watershed ecosystems, and her work with SSEA has focused on long-term water quality monitoring in the Severn Sound area, local inland lakes and rivers, along with developing several citizen science programs. And we're very familiar with those. She secretly enjoys apparently looking at algae under a microscope. So the current blue-green algae project is just right up her alley and should bring her lots of enjoyment. So Aisha, we'll ask you to go ahead with your presentation, and welcome.
Sounds good. Thank you. And I will say that I'm slowly passing along my my interest in microscope identification of algae to Sarah. So it's been fun.
Ah,
Yes, they're very interesting little creatures. So just as I get my screen going here, just put it in presentation mode. Is everyone seeing a full screen there?
Yep, we are.
Perfect. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for the invitation to come and speak to you all tonight. So we've got a great presentation for you. So just briefly, kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight. So a brief overview on the water levels conditions for this year, but really most of our time is going to be spent on the blue-green algae. So, quickly go through what is it, how to identify it, how to prevent bloom. So some of the stewardship actions that you can take, and then an update on the causation study that we've been working on, including some of the preliminary results that we've got so far. And then of course, open it up for questions. So I'm sure most folks on this call are quite familiar with the Severn Sound Environmental Association. But for those who might be a bit newer and have not been introduced to us, so we're a joint municipal service board, and we act on a watershed basis. So we have 8 different municipalities across the watershed, Tiny Township being one of our member municipalities. And we provide a number of environmental services to our municipal partners, including water quality assessments. So, and again, I won't spend too much time here, as most of you are very familiar with your own lake. But as you know, Farlain Lake is relatively shallow and a small lake. It has no surface outlet, so it's fed by groundwater and by precipitation. And it has one permanently inflowing stream. But since it has no surface outlet, it does drain very slowly, we think, by shallow groundwater outflow. And so these characteristics really shape the water quality that we see and the different conditions that we see in the lake. And so I'm going to start with just a quick water level update. So as I mentioned, the lack of that surface outflow really makes water levels more sensitive to changes in climate conditions, so namely precipitation. So in recent years, higher water levels have caused damage to shorelines, as folks know, along with man-made structures. So in 2019, we set up a water level gauge near the boat launch, and we've been having volunteers collect water level measurements at that location. So this is building a data set that's going to help us provide a better understanding of some of the seasonal patterns, as well as sensitivity to precipitation, rain events. Will give us some degree of forecasting. We definitely don't have a crystal ball here, but we can sort of look at patterns and what previous years have shown us, and allow us to further explore. And now that we're building a bit more of a stronger data set, looking at how lake levels are influenced by climate factors. So levels for this year, you can see the graph. So the orange dots, the graph on the right side, you can see that levels were fairly high at the start of the season. So similar to 2019 levels, which is when we started doing the program. We had a fairly dry spring, so levels dropped down rather rapidly, and have now been kind of hovering around similar to 2022 levels. So we have been looking at how things have fluctuated in relation to rainfall. And we do see that water levels are quite responsive to short-term changes in precipitation. So it's hard to see on the graph here, just because we don't have continuous water level measurements. But when we look at some of our compiled data, you can definitely see that after a large rain event, there's a bit of a lag period, but the lake does respond relatively quickly. So climate change is likely to cause more variability in precipitation and intensity, the amount and intensity. So making water levels more variable into the future. So given this difficulty in accurately forecasting levels, we can't necessarily say what's going to happen for the rest of the season. But just based on kind of the typical trajectory, we expect levels to continue to fall and likely probably stay around this 2019 and 2022 levels, just kind of based on the direction things are going. So, it's really important. It's not something we can really control. So it's really important to think about how your property interacts with the lake. And we encourage residents to make their shorelines as resilient as they can and adaptable to these higher water levels, and to be able to, kind of slow down runoff on your property to capture rainfall and slow that infiltration of precipitation into the ground so it can be released a little more slowly and doesn't make the lake system quite so flashy and responsive to rainfall events. And Sarah's going to talk a lot more about some of our shoreline stewardship tips that we have for residents. But before I pass it along, I want to give a big thanks to Margaret Brom and also Brent Graham for reading the water level gauge and sending in measurements for this year. So that's been super helpful. So now I'd like to pass along to Sarah, who's going to talk a lot about algae. And as I said, we'll open things up for questions at the end.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Aisha. My name is Sarah Song, and I am the Algae Causation Study Assistant with SOCA. And I'll be speaking to you tonight a little bit about algae. So what is algae? So algae, also known as phytoplankton, are a very diverse group of eukaryotic photosynthetic organisms, and they are vital components of lake food webs. So these microscopic plants grow suspended in the water column and can exist as single cells or as groups of cells in colonies and filaments. So through their photosynthesis, they use energy from the sun, carbon dioxide, and water to build sugar molecules that allow for their growth. So they're eaten by zooplankton and some fish and are vital parts of lake ecosystems. So there are 5 major groups in freshwaters. There's green algae, diatoms, red algae, dinoflagellates, golden algae, and blue-green algae. So cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, are naturally occurring microscopic organisms that are actually a type of bacteria, and they can photosynthesize, which means that they can produce their own nourishment by using light energy from the sun. So there are some species that are harmful and can produce toxins. And under certain favorable conditions, such as warmer water temperatures, higher nutrients of phosphorus and nitrogen, and also human influences, blue-green algae can multiply quickly and create these harmful algal blooms. So not all cyanobacteria species produce toxins, but every bloom should be treated as toxic until known otherwise. So how to identify green algae? So algae can take many different forms, such as free-floating or surface slick, attached or mat-forming, and macroalgae, which are plant-like. So green algae is non-toxic and can be identified by a dark to yellowish green color. So it can be stringy or woolly, cloudy-like, and often around aquatic plants. It can be in the form of bubbles embedded in thick mats or as a stringy ring around rocks. And there are floating mats of green algae that can sometimes be mistaken for a blue-green algae bloom. So how to identify blue-green algae? So blue-green algae are not normally visible in the water, but when populations rapidly increase, they can form large masses or scum when conditions are favorable. So blooms most commonly occur in late summer and early fall. However, it's becoming more common to see them earlier throughout the season. So cyanobacteria blooms can be a bright bluish green color, but can also be yellow, olive green, or red. So they can appear as a blue sheen, scum, or mats on the water surface, or also floating specks distributed throughout the water column. So dense blue-green algal blooms can make the water look like a bluish-green pea soup or a shiny paint slick. And fresh blooms often smell like fresh cut grass, while older blooms can smell like rotting garbage. So here we have some examples of past blue-green algal blooms on Farlain Lake. So on the left, we have a bloom mix throughout the water column, which is a bit more difficult to visually identify, but can be seen against the Secchi disk here. The water can look cloudy and greenish or greenish with large floating specks throughout. And on the right, we have a surface bloom from a near shore site, which can be commonly misidentified as pollen. So surface blooms can take different forms, as we showed before. For example, it can look like spilled paint, fingernail clippings, pollen, or also green peas. So what should you do if you spot a blue-green algae bloom? So if you spot what you think might be a bloom, be cautious and assume that toxins are present. So avoid all exposure to blue-green algae, including using, drinking, bathing, or swimming in the water, and also restrict pet and livestock access to the water. So you can contact the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, the MECP, Spills Action Center, and incidents can be reported online or by phone with the phone number and website listed on this slide here. So the MECP will gather information, conduct field visits as necessary, and also conduct testing to confirm if a bloom and any associated toxins are present. So if you've been in contaminated water, wash well with soap and water or rinse thoroughly with clean water to remove algae. If symptoms such as skin, eye, or throat irritation, allergic reactions, or breathing difficulties occur after contact with water, you can contact your healthcare provider. And also you can contact the Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit for information on the different health risks. And please note that boiling or chlorinating water does not get rid of toxins and can actually release more toxins by breaking algal cells open. So throughout the summer, water samples are collected from public beaches in Simcoe and Muskoka by the Simcoe-Muskoka District Health Unit, the SMDHU, and a water quality advisory will be issued by a health unit if bacterial levels increase in the water or if an algae bloom is identified to be a public health risk. So the water quality advisory may apply to a whole lake or just a small section of the lake, depending on testing and the severity of it. So please check local advisories and the active blooms listed on the health unit website before visiting a body of water, which can be accessed throughout this website here on the slide. So now we'll get into the causes of blue-green algal blooms. So there are many different causes for algal blooms in fresh waters, and it's often difficult to pinpoint exact reasons why a bloom forms. So there may be a history of excess nutrients and algal blooms in a water body, and or also natural features such as shallow inland lakes that can make water bodies more prone to algal blooms than others. In many cases, a set of unique environmental conditions occur in a water body, which can lead to a particular species dominating and triggering a bloom. So conditions such as a pulse of nutrients, phosphorus and nitrogen, following rain events, warmer temperatures, abundant light, and calm wind conditions can create suitable environmental conditions for blue-green algal blooms. So phosphorus and nitrogen are nutrients that are essential to algae production, and these nutrients encourage the growth of algae in water bodies. So phosphorus is the key nutrient limiting algal growth in the majority of lakes in the Severn Sound watershed. So increased concentrations of nutrients often lead to increased algal production and increased risk of a bloom forming. This process of nutrient enrichment in a water body is called eutrophication, which can be exacerbated by human influences such as agriculture and stormwater runoff, poorly functioning septic systems, and also shoreline development. Increasingly across Ontario, however, blooms are occurring in lakes with minimal or no human influence. So this is because of increasing water temperatures and shortening of the ice period due to climate change that are suspected to be key factors in this rise in bloom occurrence. So with support from the Township of Tiny, SSCA is currently conducting an algae causation study on Farlain Lake to determine the contributing factors that led to last year's blue-green algae bloom. So one of the key components of the study is a citizen science program that involves volunteers collecting water samples and monitoring environmental conditions on Farlain Lake. These observations will help to make links between environmental factors such as temperature, wind, and light, and algae growth. So another key component of the study includes testing and analyzing the samples collected by volunteers with fluorometers, which measure algae pigments. We're also analyzing historical climate and water quality data to determine trends and factors that are known to contribute to algal blooms, which will help in finding the cause of recent blooms. So another component of our study includes working on developing educational materials and presenting our findings to the Farlain Lake community and beyond, along with helping to guide decisions on management activities for Eurasian water milfoil, such as herbicide application. So the fluorometers used in our study measure algal pigments. So the fluorometer is just shown in the picture here. So it measures the algal pigments called chlorophyll A and phycocyanin. The pigment chlorophyll A is present in all algae and can be used as an approximate measure of the amount present in the water. And phycocyanin is a pigment primarily found in cyanobacteria. And by measuring the fluorescence of phycocyanin, it should be possible to provide an index of the amount of blue-green algae present in the water sample. So the ratio of the two pigments can be used to determine when blue-green algae are dominant and considered in a bloom state. And this would prompt further testing by the MECP and the health unit. So testing and analyzing samples with this method helps us to establish a baseline condition and gives us the levels of blue-green algae in near real time. So this can be used as a first step towards determining whether testing for toxins is required as a preventative measure to warn against potential harm from toxic blue-green algae. So this updates and provides key information to the Farlain Lake community, the MECP, and the health unit on the lake's conditions and blue-green algae growth. So we hope to use this new method as a future screening tool for blue-green algae and also as an early warning indicator. So this year, we're sampling at 5 different sites on Farlain Lake. We have 2 offshore sites, FL1 and FL2, where we're collecting both surface water and mixed samples from 1 meter off the bottom of the lake. And we also have 3 nearshore sites, FL7, FL9, and FL10, where surface water samples are collected. So I'll be speaking to you about some of the results that we have so far from this year. So for water clarity, we're measuring the water clarity, or also known as the Secchi depth, at the 2 offshore sites, which is FL1, the blue shown here on the graph, and FL2, which is the orange. So water clarity has remained relatively good so far this season, with an average of 4 meters. And where we consider less than 3 meters to be low clarity, and it's shown by the line on the graph here. So clarity at both offshore sites, FL1 and 2, is generally the same. We are noticing, however, that clarity has been worsening as the season progresses. So the pigment chlorophyll A, as we mentioned earlier, is a pigment that is present in all algae and can be used as an approximate measure of the amount of algae present in the water. So the levels of chlorophyll A have been relatively stable, with some higher readings at offshore sites at FL2, You can see a spike here on July 4th at both offshore sites. So this may have been a non-blue-green algae bloom event. And we'll see in the next slide that we kind of need to use both pigment indicators to identify when a blue-green algae bloom might have occurred. So here we can see the ratio of phycocyanin to chlorophyll A. So although chlorophyll A is found in all algae, the pigment phycocyanin is a more specific indicator of blue-green algae. So both indicators need to be used together to determine when blue-green algae are dominant and considered in a bloom state, which would prompt further testing. So here we have a graph of the ratio of the two pigments. When phycocyanin is approximately an order of magnitude higher than chlorophyll A, and when chlorophyll A is relatively high, that is when a bloom may be occurring. So this occurred on July 25th, as we can see here with the green triangle. And we followed up with the MECP, where although toxin testing showed that undetectable levels of toxins occurred, and so no water quality advisory was issued. So here we have the different impacts of environmental factors. So we have conductivity, rainfall, and water temperature kind of stacked against the phycocyanin and chlorophyll A ratio. So by looking at the data collected so far, one trend we can see is the relationship between higher surface water temperatures and higher ratios of phycocyanin and chlorophyll A. So we can see a difference in conductivity as well from nearshore and offshore sites, where conductivity usually correlates well with dissolved nutrients. So we can assume that phosphorus and nitrogen would be higher near shore, just based on the data we have so far. So this higher concentration of nutrients can be due to shoreline activities by residents and lake users. So as part of our study, we're also planning on conducting some sediment sampling tomorrow to test for dissolved oxygen and nutrients within sediment, and to see if this might be playing a role in fueling the algae growth around the lake. So what can we do to prevent blooms? So the way you live and manage your shoreline property will shape the shore either positively or negatively. So through shoreline stewardship practices, restoration, education and monitoring, you can help preserve or improve the quality of your shores. So some key recommendations include avoiding using fertilizers on lawns, especially within 100 meters of your shoreline, maintaining a natural shoreline with a wide buffer of native plants on lakefront properties, and reducing runoff by planting or maintaining vegetation in vulnerable areas and minimizing the amount of impervious surfaces on your property. So here we have an example of a naturalized shoreline. This is in Veterans Waterfront Park in Midland. And the before is from 2004 and the after was from 2023. So you can see a huge difference in these photos when you compare the rocks or signs as a point of reference. So naturalized shorelines like this one here provide benefits such as filtering runoff, removing harmful chemicals and nutrients before entering the lake, and protecting against erosion, and also providing habitat for aquatic and terrestrial wildlife. So more key recommendations to prevent algae blooms include maintaining your septic system with regular pump outs and inspections, and avoid using chemicals that will kill the beneficial bacteria in the system that keeps it running. So such as bleach and antibacterial products. You can also reduce septic output by using efficient water fixtures and minimizing water use, and using phosphate-free detergents, personal care and household cleaning products, and never using them directly in the lake. And also do not restrict water circulation around docks, which can create a nice condition for algae to form. Floating and pipe docks are best. And take care to avoid transporting invasive species in and out of the lake, which can threaten and outcompete native species. For example, invasive zebra mussels, which haven't been found in Farlain Lake yet, They can damage ecosystems and can actually increase blue-green algae in a lake by filtering out the competing algae around it. So to touch a little bit on retaining walls, in the past, shoreline erosion problems were often dealt with by the hardening of shorelines through installation of retaining walls, constructed of armor stone, riprap, old railroad ties, gabion baskets, concrete, and other materials. So while these structures often a temporary solution to erosion, they can actually result in a more damage to downstream and neighboring properties and even the shoreline that they were intended to protect. So retaining walls often, they interfere with fish habitat and natural shoreline processes and currents, and doesn't allow for natural shorelines that take up nutrients. So over time, the increased impact of water on the vertical walls in combination with surface water runoff behind the walls can lead to slumping, eroding gullies, undercutting, and eventual failure of the wall. So for an alternative to retaining walls, natural infrastructure and heavily vegetated buffer zones are the most resilient and cost-effective way to protect against high water levels and storm surges. So an ideal shoreline buffer is a strip of native wildflowers, trees, shrubs, and grasses at least 30 meters wide that extends from the waterline upland to protect the water from both natural and human impacts. So maintaining a gentle slope into the water will allow wave energy to dissipate. You can also combine native plants and shrubs with the sloped rock shore wall to get the best of both options. This will help filter runoff and reduce erosion. So in cases where a retaining wall is already in place, erosion can be reduced and the life of the wall can be protected by planting native shrubs around the wall, or in the case of a riprap shoreline, planting between the rocks. So all shoreline work requires a permit from the Township of Tiny and may also require a permit from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and or the Fisheries and Oceans Canada. So we've included a link here with some really great information from the past Shoreline and Shallows conferences if you'd like to learn more. So these slides will be available for your review after the presentation, and please check out these links for additional resources. And thank you to our partners, and special thanks to Tiny Township and the Farlain Lake Community Association. And also a big thank you to our volunteers, Mark Simpson, Scott Dales, Emily Thorne, Mike Johnson, Brian and Barb Columbus, and Pat Kelso, who are part of our citizen science program, collecting samples throughout the season.
Aisha, is there anything you wanted to add?
I think this is good to kind of leave it here and maybe open it up to any questions that folks might have.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
So you just answered one because there's a question about whether permits are required when altering your shoreline. So just answered that at the very end, which is great. And the only other question we have so far is fantastic presentation. Thank you. So, yeah, if there's no questions, I mean,
And I would say if folks do have any questions or concerns, things they might think of after this meeting here, you can direct them either directly to Sarah or funnel them through the Farlain Lake Association, and we'll try to tackle them the best we can.
yeah. Okay, great. Although Mark has a question.
Yeah.
He's asking, is there any deeper water oxygen depletion during the summer?
Yeah, that's a great question, because oxygen depletion can have a big impact on the release of nutrients from lake sediments. So Farlain Lake is shallow enough that, and doesn't really have any kind of weird shapes to the lake bed that would prevent mixing of water. So it tends to be quite well mixed, and our previous monitoring has showed that the oxygen is pretty uniform from the surface right down to the bottom. Now, having said that, our bottom water measurement is approximately 1 meter to like half a meter off the lake bed. So that's one of the things that we're going to try to target with our sampling tomorrow. We're going to see if we can get our probe a little bit down closer to the sediment. So if there's oxygen depletion right close to the sediment surface, it could still be leading to some nutrient release. So we are going to see if we can nail that down a bit. And also our sediment sampling should give us an indication as well, just based on some of the nitrogen characteristics that we see. If you pull up sediment and it smells like rotten eggs, that's a good sign that there's not very much oxygen down there. So yeah, that's going to give us a little bit more information, hopefully.
Okay, great.
Great
And,
question.
yeah, and Mark has replied so that everyone knows that it's a good plan on checking the bottom water, because saw reference to some winter declines. So
Yeah, for sure. And we did see that in our winter sampling, which we've only done the once, so it's hard to say if this is an annual occurrence, but it very well may be.
Did anything happen with the Brock University core sediment sampling that they did back in 2019?
Yeah, so unfortunately, that was 2020 actually. I remember what happened right after that that collection was done. So yeah, unfortunately, those cores kind of just sat and haven't been looked at, and so that was part of the funding that we received from Tiny Township, was to try to take those cores and see if we can get some analysis done on them. The challenge that we're having, and where Sarah's been really helpful for me, is there's a lot of different characteristics and things you can analyze in sediment cores, and they can be very expensive. So we're kind of just trying to go through our different options and prioritize what types of analysis would give us the most information and kind of best bang for our buck. So yeah, we're still in touch with Francine from Brock University, and she did mention that she might be able to have some students come again this coming winter, so we might be able to get some more sampling done.
What kind of information do you think you might be able to get from that, just so people have an idea?
Yeah, good question. So there are different biological components that can be preserved in lake sediment. So you can have things like invertebrates that leave, different body parts that sort of stay preserved. So using that, you can reconstruct like past oxygen conditions. So that's one element, which can give you an indication of like maybe the lake was deeper at one point and did experience periods where it wasn't well mixed. So that can also kind of tell you what past water levels might have been like. There are also different things that are analyses where you can look at pigments left by algae communities, so you can kind of reconstruct what the blue-green algae community might have been like, and then other types of algae indicators that stay in the water. So there's really a lot, and then you can look at the actual nutrient concentrations themselves going back through time. So depending on the size of the core that they take, they can go right back to like pre-European settlement. And some of that work has actually been done in Owenda Park. So they have done some reconstructions and sort of pieced together like when European settlement happened, because they started to see ragweed pollen in the sediment, for example, so that it can actually date when people started kind of showing up in the area, and the effects of indigenous agriculture, for example, so they could see corn pollen in some of those sediments. So pretty interesting what they can do, and again, it's just sort of narrowing down what indicators we need to focus on.
Right. Lots of possibilities there. It'd be really interesting.
Yeah,
you can get there. Great.
We have more questions that popped up, which was great. Have we identified how many installed septic systems are close to raised water levels and are in danger of water erosion?
That is a good question, because that can definitely have a bearing on, maybe how much nutrients are getting into the lake. That's not information that SSEA has, but Elizabeth, I'll maybe throw that back to you, and because I know FLCA was kind of doing some surveys at different times, and maybe you guys have a better handle on that.
I'm not aware of any right now, but I know when the township does the inspections, the septic system inspections, they would identify any issues like that where there's the potential hazard and impact on the quality of water in the lake. I don't have any more information than that. I know there was some rehabilitation work, shall we call it, done with the last round of inspections that the township did. So I'm not aware of any issues right now with septic systems around the lake. A lot of people have actually made adjustments whether moving their septic beds to holding tanks further away from the lake or wells. So definitely a number of properties have had to do that.
Yeah, that's good to know. And I will say we didn't report on the results here, but our water quality survey last year didn't show high concentrations of phosphorus or the nitrogen variables in the water. So it's a good sign, although it's sometimes hard to tell exactly because, you know, the plants that are in the lake might be taking up a lot of these nutrients. But, you know, the spring phosphorus concentrations are a pretty good indicator of, you know, if we see increases in that year over year, which we're not really. So, I think that is kind of a good sign.
Right.
And
Maybe we'll move on, but thank you ever so much. Sorry, Jen.
we had one last question.
more?
Yeah,
Okay.
one more, sorry. Is the lake still being stocked with fish as it has been in earlier years? Fish populations seem to be lower. Smaller schools of minnows and other fish have not been seen in the last couple of years, as it has been years ago.
Interesting. I'm not entirely sure actually on the fish stocking status in Farlain Lake, but that is something that we can follow up with the MNR to determine that. Elizabeth.
Scott might want to jump in here because he was in communication with MNRF, I think it was MNRF, that they do, well, have been in the past doing a regular fish survey every 5 years. And I think the last one they did was back in 2019. But Scott, I'll let you jump in here.
Yeah, actually Brent Graham and I had a 2-hour Zoom meeting with MNR about the fish studies from in 2008, 14, and 18. And we said, well, the original question was, are we on schedule? And they said, they're so far behind, we may not see one until 2025, again, in our zone. But everything that they did, all their studies showed that our actual fish population is increasing. The walleye population is increasing. The smallmouth bass is increasing. So actually, Brent Graham is writing an article that'll be in the fall Ripples,
Right.
Outlining all the graphs and charts and all the information we gathered from MNRF and going through the studies and showing that it may seem harder to find them, but apparently the numbers are going up. So
Yeah, that's good to hear.
I hope
Maybe they're getting better at evading people's hooks.
catch and release, people, catch and release.
I was going to say that we have a fishing derby.
Okay, that was it for questions. So
Great, thanks, Jen. Thank you once again, Aisha. Always a pleasure to have you join us, and certainly always very educational, and great to have you with us, Sarah. This time, excellent presentations, and as Jen mentioned, we'll post the website, the slides that Aisha and Sarah have used tonight to the website, and of course their presentation is being recorded as well. So lots of information there. It's great.
Great.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. Have a good night.
Enjoy the rest of your evening. Okay, Jen.
there, just clickety click.
Great. So now we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, and I'll ask Jerry Pipe if you can speak to the AED devices.
You bet. Thanks, Liz. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Farlainers. I am Jerry. And I'll just wait for my slides to come up. I'm going to have a riveting presentation about defibrillators for you.
They are here.
This won't hurt a bit. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
At last year's general meeting, the board committed to investigate the viability of locating AEDs, automated external defibrillators, around our lake, and to address possible cases of sudden cardiac arrest. So what we considered was, how much will they cost? How will we distribute the units around the lake? What maintenance is required for them? Emergency retrieval times, if you had to get one. Membership training, of course, and then membership communication.
Sorry, the clicking is being slow. There we go.
All right. So let's consider the facts. Sudden cardiac arrest. There are approximately 40,000 cases of this in Canada every year, and only 10% of folks survive it. It's a very short window. It's an electrical issue, sudden cardiac arrest. It can happen to anyone, including children. Our heart stops pumping blood around our body, the normal rhythm is disrupted, and your heart shakes. The patient turns color and begins something called agonal breathing. That replicates like a fish out of water. The mouth is moving, but they're not taking in any air. It requires CPR response and an AED within 4 minutes before brain damage begins. And beyond 10 minutes, the damage is irreversible. 90% of sudden cardiac arrest patients die if not treated immediately. So for every minute the heart's in cardiac arrest without, at minimum, CPR, mortality increases by 10%. It's much rarer than heart attacks, although much deadlier. Most cases of this occur in people who have coronary artery disease. Arteries become clogged with cholesterol and other deposits that reduce the blood flow to the heart. Very often we confuse a cardiac arrest with a heart attack or a stroke. The difference there is that there are 62,000 strokes in Canada every year. A patient may collapse, but they're still breathing, they're still conscious, and AEDs are not required in that case.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
There we go. Sorry.
All right, we're on track. So the whole deal, like real estate, is location, location, location for these AEDs. So we conducted a time and motion study from lakeside cottages to the road and from backlot cottages to the road, and determined that the location, and we did that based on, we had an AED every 2 cottages. I ran up and down that hill so many times, I likely needed an AED or a CPR at the end of it, but I could not do that within 5 minutes. And remember, 4 minutes is the critical time. We don't have any beach anymore, so lakeside access between cottages is very limited or almost non-existent. So we determined an AED would have to be no further than 2 or 3 addresses to be there in time. Now, I should tell you, there are approximately 220 lakefront properties and about 150 backlots. So at best, if we installed an AED every 3 properties on the roadside, we need 125 of them. At an average price of $1,500 a unit, that's $188,000. And they come with optional features at an additional cost. They can be battery powered. You can have an alarm when the door opens, GPS tracking, so we can track right to where they're being used, a night light, et cetera, et cetera. And outside placements are even more expensive.
Sorry. There we go.
Okay.
They got stuck.
There's also maintenance required with these AEDs, monthly inspection processes, and it requires inside winter storage, which would even further enhance access in a time-limiting fashion. And given the number of units required and the subsequent excessive cost to ensure timely, accessible coverage and maintenance, we as a board just can't consider moving forward with the purchase and installation of AEDs surrounding our lake. It just isn't viable. However, we do have some alternative recommendations for all of our health, and that is that we'll develop and communicate an emergency response process. We should compile a list of first aid qualified members on the lake. Anyone that was formerly a hockey trainer, for instance, and many of us are first aid qualified. If we published a list, you could post it in your cottage. It'd be good to know your neighbors that could help. We'd also include CPR training techniques online. They've changed over the years. It's not a difficult thing to do. It does take a lot of compression. And we would also provide, though, AED program information for individual members or groups on the lake who may still be interested in coordinating AED purchases amongst themselves. We've done it in one location on the lake, up on Andrew Drive. 3 or 4 neighbors got together, they put together the funding for it and installed one. And we'll be happy to have that on the website for you if you'd like to pursue that. Thanks, folks.
Questions for Jerry, Jen?
I don't have anything in the chat box, so I'm going to assume that there's no questions, but we will circulate the information about purchasing and installing them.
Definitely. And good recommendations, I think, Jerry, especially the one about possibly setting up sort of a database of people that are trained in some way. But we'll talk, the board can deal with that a little bit further.
You bet.
Okay, then, moving right along, I'll ask Ross Graham to present his treasurer's report. Ross.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Good evening, everyone. As in prior years, we continue to track our FLCA funding in 3 buckets. The Eurasian Water Milfoil Fund, which was created starting in 2013, and to date, from 2013 to 2023, we've got funding of almost 114,000 over the last year. Thank you to those who have contributed. Even though we've not done any fundraising, we have had an additional $1,100 contributed to that fund. There have been no expenditures from that fund because all of the current milfoil activity is being handled through the Trillium grant. So at this stage, we have a balance of $28,000 left in that fund, which can be applied to milfoil activity if required post the Trillium funding, which was mentioned earlier. The funding date that it ends will be in 2024. The second bucket we operate under is operations, which is just the ongoing operations of the FLCA. We started off with just about $10,600, but with our revenue and expenses, our expenses are principally the main expenses that are incurred in the year are we have insurance for liability. We have website costs, which are actually substantially lower than they were in prior years, thanks to Elizabeth's work with several of our suppliers. And we also had some costs in the past year for algae testing when the blue-green algae was identified last year. But the net of it is we have still $11,400 left for operations, so that's a good position. The Trillium funding, which to date, we've received $194,600 from Trillium. There's an additional, what remains to be paid to us was another $5,000, which would max the grant. That will not be paid to us until after we file the final report in 2024 for the activity in the funding. Expenses to date have been about $160,000, largely because of COVID and approvals. We've not had the expenditures we expected to this date, but it leaves us with a balance of about $36,000 in the fund. And as I said, there's still $5,000 to come from Trillium. So we have about $41,000 to expend between now and the end of 2024. And the key message in that is Trillium, in issuing a grant, expects that you expend 100% of the funding. And in the final report, that's what we would like to demonstrate, that we've expended the funds, but for the benefit of the grant intention. There are a number of programs that will utilize some of the funding right now, as has been mentioned. In September, there will be the cost of the Priscilla-Core application, and then any of the follow-up from there. But at this stage, I would say we're in a good funding position to meet all our obligations for the treatment of the milfoil over the next year, and be in a good position to be able to utilize all of the OTF funding for the benefit of Farlain Lake. That's about all I have to say on the finances.
Ross, do you
Hello?
want to see if there's any questions before we go?
Are there any questions?
I do not see any.
Okay, then we do this annually. I know I see a note that it may not be required, but I think it's, we do it every year just to have it in place in case it won't be required this year. We won't need it, but I thought we would still proceed with the motion anyway, that the members of the Farlain Lake Community Association grant the authority to the board of directors to approve the unaudited annual financial statements when the annual revenue does not exceed $100,000. I know this year we will not exceed 100,000, but I just thought it would be prudent to have the motion in place anyway. So I would ask the members to vote on that motion.
And we do have a seconder from Mike Johnson. Thank you, Mike. So Jen, go ahead with the poll.
Yeah. The poll has been launched. All right. Oh, 100.
Okay.
Okay, so
Motion's carried.
motion's carried. I'll just end the poll and share so everyone can see.
And okay,
There we go.
so final motion I would make is that the finance report be accepted by the members.
And we have a second from John Tilger. So thank you, John.
Okay, and
Next.
poll is launching as we speak. Okay. And we do have a question while the poll is happening from what is the cost to put the Priscilla core into the lake for this first application?
The agreement we have with Solitude, who will be the applicator, is that it's $16,000 US, which is the application for this year and a follow-up in the next year and the year after that. So I think it's to be very frank with you, we expected the cost to be significantly higher. So I think it's very reasonable that includes their equipment, their people, and the herbicide. That's the agreed cost.
And just to clarify, the follow-up next year and the following year is the evaluation and reporting component. But if there's another application required, then we would have to pay for the product and the labor.
There would be additional costs if there was a further need, but we'll have to wait and see. As Mark said, we have to wait and see.
Right.
All right, and the finance report is passed, so I'll stop sharing.
Great. Motion's carried.
Motion's carried.
Thank you very much.
All
Thank you
right.
so much, Russ. So moving on then to the special resolution in regards to the articles of amendment. Well, as I mentioned in my, sorry, I'm gonna go. As I mentioned in my earlier report from the president, one of the many projects that we've been working on is ensuring we're compliant with the newly enacted ONCA legislation. And the first step was preparing the articles of amendment for filing with Service Ontario for approval. And that the articles of amendment are basically confirming our status as an incorporated organization under ONCA. The key elements that need to be included in these articles are the number of directors, the objects or purpose of the organization, classes of membership, and the voting rights of members. So those are the things that need to be submitted to Service Ontario in the government for their approval. So we're bringing the wording of these elements for your approval by special resolution from the board prior to filing with the government. And your approval requires a 2/3 majority in favor of the motion. A second isn't required tonight because this is a special resolution coming directly from the board. So the special resolution was sent out with the alert with the information from the AGM back on Saturday, August the 12th. But since then, we've adjusted the opening clause in the resolution, as you'll see from the information on the slide. And Jen, maybe you can go to the next slide actually with the resolution there. what we've adjusted the opening clause a little bit because we've need some flexibility. The board needs some flexibility in the wording as we go through the actual filing process online. And specifically, we need that flexibility in defining the qualification for membership. As the current wording that you see in the motion indicates, and this is based on our current bylaws, that membership is restricted to properties within an area referenced in the bylaws as the shoreline residential community number 20 of the official plan of the Township of Tiny in the province of Ontario. And that's what's stated in the supplementary letters patent that were submitted back in 2008 when the association's name was changed and the supplementary letters patent were submitted. So that official plan is outdated. And so that makes this wording not valid. And we're currently waiting assistance from the township for wording that will be able to replace it in the plan. But the intent really remains the same. The intent is that membership is restricted to the area around Farlain Lake. It is meant to include all waterfront lots, all back lots, plus the subdivisions directly in the vicinity of the lake. And that will need to be incorporated in the filing. It's just the wording that we need for that. Now, further details regarding membership will be included in the bylaws, which we're going to be reviewing over the coming year. And any changes will now come back to you next year at the 2024 AGM. But the bylaws don't have to be submitted for approval to the government. It's just that we need to ensure that we are fully compliant with the provisions in the new act. Now, the purpose outlined in this special resolution is the same as that submitted with the supplementary letters patent with the name change back in 2008. We saw no reason to change that. There was a really minor change, and that is the removal of one phrase under item B in the purpose, which is for widely diverse purposes after the word woodlands in item B. We just felt that that phrase was not necessary. But other than that, the purpose is exactly the same as 2008. So I just wanted to, maybe we can take a few minutes to see if there are any questions about the process before we move on to the actual resolution. Jen, any questions come in?
There don't seem to be.
No?
No.
Okay, then at this point, maybe Ross, I'll ask you to present the motion on the resolution on behalf of the board.
Therefore be it resolved that the membership approve the articles of amendment substantially in the form as presented to the membership on August 16th, 2023. And upon such approval, the president is hereby authorized to file same subject to such non-material amendments as he or she shall deem necessary and advisable prior to such filing.
And I've launched the poll.
Yes, please.
Oh. Okay, so 75, 80% of people have participated. And everybody has voted yes so far. So I think
We're safe.
we're safe.
I think we
And
can
I'll share.
declare the resolution passed then, with many thanks to everybody. And we will certainly, any further changes to the articles, we'll communicate that to the members as soon as we finalize them. Okay, perfect. If we can now move on then to Jerry, I will ask you to go through the election of the board.
Okey doke, thanks, Liz. Our bylaw, I'll be brief, folks. This is just an order of business regarding elections, but our bylaws provide for a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 10 directors on the team. This past year we had 8. We lost Tommy Hayes, so currently we've been operating with 7. The term of office is 3 years, and the bylaws permit a second term, and then further an extension beyond 2 terms is necessary. At this time, Liz is stepping down as the president and leaving the board. 3 directors are continuing within the current term: Wendy Huck, Margie Brahm, and myself. 2 directors have completed their first term and need to be elected for their second term: Scotty Dales and Jeanette Parker. We're fortunate to have 1 nomination for a new director, Miss Emily Thorne. Let me just give you a brief history about Emily here. She moved to Farlain, the Farlain Lake area in 22. She has over 10 years of environmental work and volunteer experience that she looks forward to putting to use on the board. Emily currently works for the federal government, supporting marine conservation work in the Arctic. Emily has been one of our Farlain Lake Community Association citizen scientists, already working with the Severn Sound Environmental Association, taking weekly water samples for the blue-green algae Caucasian study underway this summer. In her free time, she enjoys exploring the outdoors with her partner Mark and their dog Hook. And as we speak, in fact, they are camping somewhere in the north. I truly hope not the Arctic. With that said, may I propose a motion as depicted on the slide that Scott Dales and Jeanette Parker be re-elected for a second term, that Ross Graham be elected for another extended term of 1 year, thanks Ross, and that Emily Thorne be elected for her first term of 3 years. Do I have a second?
Yes, we have a second from Herb Huck.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Herb.
Herb.
I'll launch the poll. All right. I think we can end the poll and declare that everyone voted yes.
Okey-doke.
Looks like a few members have raised their hand, Jen.
Oh, nope, they're gone now. I think that was the seconding.
Oh, okay.
They're like, hi, yes, which is great.
Perfect.
Yep. All
Thank
right.
you. Just one additional comment. Some people have asked. The board actually at the next meeting following the annual general meeting elects the president and the other officers from within the board of directors. And now that you've actually elected him for another term, I'm very, very happy that the plan is that Scott Dales will be assuming the role of president of the FLCA. And I'm very happy about that. But I know that with the entire board that you have now, you're in very, very good hands, and I wish everyone all the best. Dawn?
Okay. So let's see. We have who's speaking to this lovely slide?
Yeah. Did Dawn have a question?
I'm not sure. I've reached out to him. So.
All right. One final thing. I just wanted to recognize Tom Hayes, even though he is no longer with us on the board. Tom left us in May because he sold his cottage, unfortunately, and very sadly left the lake. But Tom was a director on the FLCA board for the past 2 years, and we were very, very sad to lose him with the sale of his cottage. We'd like to take this opportunity to sincerely thank him for his hard work and dedication as a director for 2 years, and particularly his leadership during that time for the Eurasian Water Milfoil project. We did present Tom with a frame certificate and recognition at the May board meeting, and we know he's celebrating as much as the rest of us at the news that we can now proceed with Procelicor with DFO's approval. So thank you, Tom. And that's it from my end, Jen.
Yeah. Oh, it's not it from our end. Hold on a second while I switch slides around. Come on, Zoom. All right. Let me share my screen. There we go. All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. I believe there's someone that has some words to say.
Okay, good people, it's Jerry one more time. And Now we've come to the final important order of business. And that's to recognize the phenomenal contribution our Elizabeth has made to our lake community after so many years. So many, in fact, that Liz's tenure dates back 15 years to the origins of the then newly initiated Farlain Lake Community Association way back in 2008. As a rookie volunteer, she was immediately handed a shoebox full of documents and assigned the challenge of the membership portfolio. Soon after came communications director and responsibility for answering all the emails from members and regulators. Coincidentally, at that first time, generously providing her own personal outlook. 3 years later, Liz agreed to a second term. So in 2011, a higher responsibility and calling, she became our Mamala Elizabeth in the vice presidency. She had to step away, appropriately so, for a year or two for a family illness, but while she stayed off, she still continued with the production of our newsletter and she built our website. In 2018, Liz again stepped up even further and assumed the role of Madam President. In that first year, she produced the Farlain Lake Seasons fundraising calendar, negotiated our service agreement with the Severn Sound Environmental Association. She led the team to the successful Ontario Trillium Foundation grant to fight the Eurasian water milfoil. She facilitated the membership and represented our interests with the Federation of Cottages Associations, or FOCA as it's known. And then 1 year later in 2019, under her guidance and leadership, we were awarded the FOCA Achievement Award for Environmental Stewardship, Education, Innovation, and Successes, a particularly special honor for our community, as we were selected from over 500 participating lake associations in Ontario. Liz networked cooperatively with county council and departmental staff with the Severn Sound Environmental Association to further strengthen our role to protect our lake and serve the community's needs and concerns of our lake community. Concerns included but not limited to the septic field in our lake's watershed, fluctuating water levels, blue-green algae bloom outbreaks, and the continuing battle versus the ever-persistent threat of the Eurasian water milfoil that we hope to see comes to a conclusion. Liz was most recently worked with team members, revising and rewriting our constitution and bylaws into complete compliance with the regulations. Her salesmanship has been in full display as she has recruited, mentored, and new volunteers for our board and committee teams. Elizabeth has prepared immediate lake alerts when required, written countless articles for our Ripples newsletter, always keeping us up to date and well informed, promptly responding professionally to all membership inquiries posted on the website. But this is not a eulogy, folks, because here's the good news. Liz is committed to stay in the team with us as our communications director. So gratefully and most thankfully, we haven't heard the last of her yet. There is one last item. At this point, we have a special presentation for Liz and our exiting Madam President. Mr. Peter Andrews, past president and Eurasian water milfoil subject matter expert, has prepared a gift. That gift was delivered to Elizabeth with his strict instructions not to be opened until this very time. And therefore, Liz, if you please, will you open up your gift?
Yeah, I was told absolutely no peeking until this point in time at the end of the meeting. And I just wanted, this is absolutely gorgeous. And I know it was Daryl that was
So
the
you've seen it?
creator of this wonderful wrapping job, but I have not peeked.
Okay, good girl.
I will, and it's supposed to be easy to open. And it says, did you peek? No, it did not. Oh dear. Oh my goodness. Oh my. Okay. This is absolutely gorgeous.
I think we have a slide with a picture on it, do we, Jen?
Do you? Okay.
There you go.
There we go. It is absolutely beautiful. There is, in recognition, Elizabeth DeChiara, your commitment to the Farlain Lake Community Association has been nothing short of exceptional. I'm gonna start crying. Through your mentoring, partnering, communication, and organizational skills, you have united Lake community residents into a highly regarded volunteer organization, which has enabled FLCA members to collectively take action on matters of common concern and interest. Thank you for dedicating your time, knowledge, and skills to the betterment of Farlain Lake, the FLCA, and the community at large. August 6, 2023. And on the back, oh my goodness, are a number of photos, and you might not be able to see them, but here they are. And I know Pete and Daryl, you're responsible for putting this together. It is absolutely beautiful. I did already say a few words in my president's report. I have gotten so much out of working with the association, and I'd just like to say that again, it's just been an honor. It's been a pleasure. I am not going away. I'm going to be helping Jen with communications. I'm not going to be a director, but Jen and I will continue to work together on communications, and then there's the bylaw issue, but always in the background for helping out where I can. But I will be certainly enjoying some more time with my family as well. Thank you so much to everybody.
That's a lovely plaque. Thank you, Peter, and congratulations, Liz. We're all in your debt for a job. Very well done, girl.
Thank you. Peter, no, thought I saw him. I think at this point then, Jen, it's a wrap, unless any other questions have come in. Is there anything in the Q&A?
There is. Yep. Well, two of them are big thank yous. And then, sorry, my screen's just, of course, decided to be a little bit messy here because PowerPoint is unfriendly at times. I guess we did have, so there's thank you so much, Elizabeth, for all your amazing contributions from Lisa Conry. Tammy Turpin also says, thank you, Elizabeth, for all your years of hard work and many, many hours working so tirelessly for our lake. So those are wonderful. And we did have one question. It's a general one, well, specific but general. Is there any plan to bring the OPP to cruise the lake? The actions of some personal watercraft are illegal, mainly in regards to water skiing and tube pulling. The laws are 2 people on a personal watercraft and only tow 1 person, and we've had 3 on a personal watercraft and 2 on the tube.
Yeah, that's definitely related to boating safety for sure, and it's a concern. I think at this point it's on the list.
Okay, great. And another thank you, Elizabeth, and thank all of you from Brian and Pat Kelso. So I think that's it.
Right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. We're a little bit over here, but I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening and certainly enjoy the rest of the summer. Thanks, everyone.
And we will be posting all of the slides and the links soon.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks, Jen. Night, team.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you,
Jen.
everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
I'll be ending this shortly.